everyone in this church is or has at some point been a young person, hopefully in this church. But if you weren't in this church, then you were definitely a young person in some other kind of context. And I speak to you now, probably a little bit on the border of no longer being a young person, but I'm going to fight for that until my dying breath. Can you hit the next slide for me? I think we need to acknowledge that there are problems between young people and the church. And my academic background, I really don't like making statements without following them up with some kind of research or without some kind of objective fact. And I'll walk through that with you today. But I want to discuss any potential issues that young people have with adults and any potential issues that adults have with young people. And I don't really want this to just be a lecture. So if you have anything that pops to mind now, if you have any ideas, please feel free to let me know. Do you have any, as a community, do you have any ideas as to why young people are maybe not engaging, or how you are getting young people to engage in your parish? Does anyone have any ideas for me? It's cool, I've got 30 minutes, so I can wait and we can look at each other. This is going to be... Let me just repeat the question. Do you guys have any idea why young people may have issues with the church today? Yeah. So no one did what my mother did. I agree. I'm very, very blessed to have my mom. Anyone else got any other ideas? They don't feel welcome in the church. Thank you. Any other thoughts? Cool. So I know that there's probably some thoughts going through your mind. There's probably some kind of idea as to why it is that you feel like that's the case. And I can tell you from my own experience, having been a little bit older than young people and having been a young person recently, I can tell you that there are two different answers that you're going to get from two different age groups. And it's very interesting for me to find out why those answers are so different. So I think it's important to acknowledge at this point that we as a younger generation and we as an older generation and these generations being in the church often don't agree, or often there's a bit of a mismatch, or we're not 100% entirely. Can you hit the next slide for me, please? On the left, you'll see some. Before I made this talk, I did go and have a conversation with more senior members of our own church community. And on the right, you'll see issues that young people have raised with me as well. And I just want to go through them quite briefly. Issues with the youth. So these are issues that adults tend to have with young people in the church. There's a lack of respect for authority, or there's disobedience from younger people. There's a lack of participation in the church, and I think this needs to be acknowledged. Unreliability when it comes to young people. There's a lack of reverence or inappropriate dress code when it comes to people coming to Mass or people participating in the church. Now, just to acknowledge, now we mentioned dress code. I am dressed in my penguin suit. Today was a mad rush. I do apologize if I was a little bit late, Father. But I think it's unrealistic to expect every young person to come into this church dressed like this every Mass or every weekend. So those were the issues that I noted from an adult's perspective. And I want to discuss the issues that younger people tend to have with adults. And importantly, I don't want to say this as if I'm trying to judge you or condemn you. This is me communicating what young people have communicated to me. The first one is that there's a lack of formation or relevance when it comes to the church with adults. The second one, there's a lack of respect or support for younger people in their communities. And the final one is there's a lack of inclusivity and engagement. Lack of a better word, young people don't feel welcome. And so I am not here to criticize, but I want to talk about how we make space for young people in the church. Hit the next button for me. And so, as much as this may seem a bit biased, it is slightly, we're not going to consider the first block. We're going to primarily focus just on the second one for now. And that doesn't mean that the problems that older people have with young people are invalid. And I think it is important, young people, I speak on behalf of them, and having dealt with similar issues, we do need to step up. We do need to do better. We do need to remind the church that this is our church too. And that will be something that I mentioned a little bit later on. Hit the next slide for me again, please. So I want to share my experience as to what it feels like growing up in the church, or what it felt like growing up in the church. And bear in mind, I did come from a very comfortable position. Not every context is the same, and where I was raised is going to be fundamentally different to how you were raised and how your young people are being raised today. It's important to acknowledge that. I'm not an expert on every community, and I don't profess to be such. But what I do say is that this is the general sentiment that I pick up from young people when I have these kinds of conversations. Raul, hit me with the next slide there. Simply put, being a young person in the church sometimes sucks. Like it is really, really difficult. And why is that, Raul? It feels like we want to be seen but not heard. And so what does that look like? I know a lot of parishes who are really pro and really encourage having young people in the church. You know, we want to see young people in the pews. We want to see young people praying and being happy and. But when it comes to discussing things that we feel like we really want to discuss, we don't often have a platform to have that conversation. When it comes to discussing things that are deeply personal and important to us, not just as a young person, but critical to our relationship with God, it doesn't feel like we have a platform to voice that. And there's often times where not only do we not have a platform, but it's emphasized that we cannot have a say until we reach such and such an age, or we cannot have a say because there's a queue of people that need to be heard slightly before us. And it is very difficult, and it could be convicting to say these things. But I want to give you a sense check. When was the last time you talked to a young person about their church experience? And that could be today, that could be this morning, that could be last week, but only you know the answer to that question. The reason I'm asking the question is because I know there's a lot of young people that can't say that they've voiced what they feel about the church, or what they feel about their community, or what they feel about how we can make this community a safe place or safe space for them. Next slide. Thanks, Ron. And so, as I mentioned earlier, I have a very strong academic background, and I don't like just making these statements without giving some kind of proof. So what I've done is I've included the research, right? It's important before I get going to acknowledge that this research ties very closely in with America. It is based in America. But the sentiment that I've heard is very similar to the sentiment that I'm hearing and the sentiment that I'm feeling when it comes to South Africa. Just to give you a little bit of an idea as to what the survey was, the goal for the survey is to find out how young people felt about their church communities, and even more importantly, why young people were leaving the church. And so the experiences and their responses, I feel like, are very valuable, and I will suggest them, and I encourage you to think about them in your own context. Does this make sense or does it not? So I'm going to post the question. I'm also going to show the results of the question. Roll. What is your general feeling about the church right now? And sorry, that's not the clearest image over there. But effectively, the question at the top is literally, what is your general feeling about the church right now? The insights on there, over 50% of young people are unsatisfied with their church experience. That's the blue bar at the top over there. Next one is extremely satisfied. The next one is mediocre. And the last one is just no response. Recent conversations with confirmation candidates that I've had on retreat or on confirmation camps has echoed this exact same sentiment. I remember sitting in a confirmation camp at a Catholic school out on my side of the world, and we basically held a one-on-one session with them where young people were encouraged to just share what it is that they're going through. And for many of them, this was the first half an hour in years that they had the opportunity to just talk, to just share, to just vent, to often cry, often just break down, which is very difficult to see. But the questions that I asked them echoed this exact same sentiment. More than half of young people feel unsatisfied in their church experience right now. Or will hit me with the next one. How likely are you to recommend your church to a friend? So there's three answers there: yes, no, and no response. On the left, you have no. 60% of young people said that they would not recommend their church community to a friend. The middle one is yes, about 35% said that they would, and the final one was no response. Only 35% of young people are comfortable enough to bring their friends to the church. And if I'm a young person, and this was my own experience, and my experience as a youth leader, one of the most impactful and important ways that I can get young people to come into the church is by getting their friends to invite them into the church themselves. It's a question of talking to a friend and saying, hey, I really like going to youth on a Friday night, or I really like going to mass on a Sunday afternoon, morning, insert whatever is relevant. Do you want to come with me? That has been the most powerful form of almost bringing young people into the church that I've experienced over the past decade, because it lends credibility to the program that we're running and to the church that we belong to. It's an invitation of a peer of theirs to enter into the same place and into the same community. Unfortunately, what we're seeing is that 60% of young people aren't going to do this, aren't going to invite their friend to join the church. Raul? The next question, is the church addressing the issues that you face every day? Sorry, I can't even see what number that is. I think it's about 60% said no. 60% of the young people said that the church isn't addressing the conversations that they're having. And let me be entirely clear, the church is. Without a shadow of a doubt, the church is answering difficult questions. The church is teaching the truth of the gospel and the truth of Jesus Christ. Without a shadow of a doubt, and I know this because I've been the person that's tried to go and find the answer to communicate it to young people, but young people aren't even in the space to be able to receive or to hear that, right? Which is a challenge. Final, I think that's it. We'll just hit me with one more slide. And this was, sorry, so just before we end off on that point, the reason I included that level of research, there was other things, and again, important to emphasize, this was not a Catholic church that this survey was conducted at. It was also not in the South African context, but as I mentioned, I feel like there's similar sentiments that we're experiencing with young people in the church.